Janine was exhausted. She could not seem to even make her words come out of her mouth the way that she wanted to. They slipped around each other and she felt mealy-mouthed. She had had the longest day of her life. It probably wasn't the very longest day of her life, but it felt like it at the time. She must have worked on 19 cars before she left work that day. Mostly transmissions, some brakes. She didn't complete all of them. She was in charge of coordinating all the other mechanics. She kind of oversaw their work, but getting her hands in all those cars, and it just seemed like the problems multiplied like rabbits all throughout the shop. And the heat made everyone in the worst mood. Janine loved her job. She loved being a mechanic. She had started doing that, just working on the scooters with her brother when she was a kid. She absolutely adored her brother and wanted to do everything exactly like he did. He did not go on to be a mechanic professionally, but she found that that was exactly what she was meant to do. And she loved being in the shop with the smells of oil and metal. She loved talking to the customers, and she loved working with all her other fellow mechanics. But on this particular day, it was hot, people were stinky, and they were grumpy. She just wanted to go home and have a cold beer and a cold shower and snuggle up with her partner and maybe watch some television and maybe eat some ice cream. As she headed out of the shop, she almost had a premonition that something was going to continue to go wrong, that the grumpy moods and the foul smells were not enough. It was dusk as she pulled out, very late for her to leave work. And she headed down the road, just praying that nothing else went wrong before she got home. Along the way, she
opened the windows of the car and let her hand hang out, feeling the air flow over her fingers and on her face. It was still hot, but the heat of the day had passed, and she was glad to be moving and feeling that air, dripping away some of the sweat. She had just gotten on the interstate, taken that not long, but seems like long after a hard day of work, 5 miles home. And it passed down at Sarasota Street when she heard a bang and the car swerved over to the right and then to the left, and she had to pull it off hard to the right. She had a flat, and not a little flat, a big flat. Mechanics sometimes don't take good care of their cars. And her tires had worn thin. She got out and she looked at it and she shook her head and said, well, isn't that just like today? So she stood there on the side of the road,
feeling exceptionally sorry for herself. And she started to mutter under her breath, I just need one good thing to go right today. Just one thing. She walked on the inside of the car away from the speeding traffic as it went by, around to her trunk to get the jack so that she could change the flat. She opened the trunk of the car and cursed. She had forgotten that she had used her flat for her spare for somebody else's flat just the month before and never replaced it. There was nothing in the trunk of her car but the jack. She couldn't believe it. Just when she was going back to the passenger side to reach through and get her phone, she heard a crunch of gravel behind her as a truck pulled up. Now, in her experience, a truck pulling up could go very, very well or very, very poorly, and rarely anywhere in between. She backed out of her car, and Janine was an attractive woman, even greasy from the day's work. She thought, I wonder if I can elicit some assistance from whoever this person is. And she looked across, and oh my goodness, it was her high school coach. It was her high school coach in volleyball, and she had never been happier to see her. This was the woman, Maureen, that taught her to recover like no one else ever had. Every time you hit the gym floor, you bounce back up, whether the ball was gotten or not. This was exactly the person she needed in her corner at this point in time. It was like her fairy godmother had arrived. She went over to Maureen and gave her a huge hug, and then pulled back from her and noticed how old she had gotten. And she was wrinkled and gray, but still had the same sparkly gray eyes that she had loved, even when she was being yelled at. She was overjoyed and immediately forgot the anger of having the flat. Maureen said, "Well, girlie, what have you done here?" Janine said, "Well, don't you know, I'm just having the perfect end to an absolutely perfect day." And Maureen said,
Yeah, those flats. I hate getting them. You know, I keep my truck up real well. I change the tires when they're getting a little low. You know that because I bring you in all the time and I give you good business. So what's this about your car? What's this about your tires? How did they get this low? How did you get to this stage, girl? Well, Maureen wasn't very interested in that. She was interested in getting her tire changed. And so she said, you know, let's get this tire taken care of and we can go over and sit down. And after I clean up, we'll have a nice glass of wine and I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you what's happened since I graduated and how things are at the shop. I'd just love to have that conversation. But right now I got this tire. This tire needs fixing and I even got a spare. You don't happen to have a spare in the back of that trunk, do you?
well, she had a funny look on her face with that question. She said, you know, about a year ago, I had a friend that got in some trouble because she didn't have a spare. And ever since then, I've carried a couple in the back of my truck. Why don't we just pull one out and we'll put this on? And I would love to go hang out with you at your home, talk over old times. I'm so grateful that I can show up and be of help to you. But I would like to talk about how this happened to your tires. Janine said, okay. And as the traffic continued to go by, the two women jacked up the car, changed the tire very quickly, and made their way home.